Olga and her brother Prieto find themselves torn between the American dream and their duty to their homeland. I discuss this and more on today's episode. To Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I found in my travels. Today's book is somewhat unusual, focusing on family and Puerto Rico. I am referring to Olga Dies Dreaming by Xochitl Gonzalez, which was published in 2021. For those who don't know, Xochitl Gonzalez is a American writer, multiracial, having Mexican and Puerto Rican heritage, among many other things, most likely. They don't have a lot of books to their name. This is actually their first book that they wrote, which, what a debut. This is, in my opinion, very close to being perfect. So I definitely want to check out more of Gonzalez's other work, because this is probably highly indicative of for a greater quality down the road. But I think Gonzalez has only ever published 2 other books, so that seems to be where they're at. And given that they have a background, their family is Puerto Rican, I wonder how much of this is kind of relevant to their life versus how much of it is made up, because it feels oddly specific at times. But that's sometimes good writers can make something feel oddly specific. But yeah, pretty good book. I got this from my friend Bevan, who sent it to me when they moved to India. So definitely a major victory for me, because it's really good. It's probably the best, one of the best that I read this year, maybe that I read for this channel. Another high quality Bevan read. But yeah, without further ado, let's talk about this book. I will end up not spoiling it in the summary section, but I probably will spoil it in the analysis section, because there is quite a bit worth talking about. So I recommend that you go out and read this and then come back and watch this video, because this is definitely going to be one that I recommend, and I don't necessarily want to just spoil it right away for you. But without further ado, let's talk about Olga Dies Dreaming. I will do a summary, a little bit of analysis, and we will move on from there. So Olga Dies Dreaming focuses on a couple different characters. It focuses on Olga Acevedo. She is a wedding planner in Brooklyn, and serves pretty fancy, wealthy clientele. She is a Puerto Rican woman, around 40 years old, and at the beginning of the story, she learns of one of her vendor's employees' deaths, a man named Jan, who was a closeted gay man, died after learning he killed himself after learning he might have been HIV positive, and she goes to his funeral, where it seems like her employer never really cared about, or his employer never really cared about Jan. And then later she goes to a bar and runs into a man named Mateo, and she strikes up a relationship with him throughout the story. And then also throughout the story, we see a variety of letters addressed to Olga or her brother Prieto, who's a congressman at the time of the story, just basically talking about why her mother had to leave, her thoughts on Olga almost becoming engaged, and what's going on in Prieto's life. And some of it is this woman is not very nice and has high expectations for her children. And again, indeed, the mother abandoned the children to the grandmother at a fairly young age for the children, because she wanted to go help Puerto Rico with its revolution, and ended up traveling elsewhere as well. And the story also focuses on Prieto. He is, of course, a congressman, Puerto Rican congressman, trying to help his constituents, although they have some doubts about whether he's truly for them. Meanwhile, Olga has an affair with a man named Dick Eichenborn, who is the father of one of the people that she helped with a wedding that she planned. He's very into her, but she's kind of just using him, not really fully committed to the relationship. Prieto gets arrested in 2001, and that's where he gains a little bit of notoriety, but he's also blackmailed by very wealthy donors in the community, who want him to cater to their interest. Prieto is gay, and they had dirt on him about that, and they frequently use that on him as time progresses. And given the way that he votes on one bill about promesa, which is a Puerto Rican sort of finance law, Prieto is sent worms by his mother, and when he tries to confront his mom's friend Karen about that, she's like, "Your mom has nothing more to say to you. You know what you've done," and Prieto feels bad about that. Prieto and Olga end up going to a Blumenthal party that's being held, partially which celebrates Prieto, but also celebrates the wealthy people in a nearby community. It's there that Prieto is sort of confronted by a man named Reggie Reyes, who Olga used to be engaged to before her mother told her to break off the relationship in one of her letters. Reggie is a Puerto Rican hip-hop artist who is speaking out for the people in the community, and he's calling out Prieto because he doesn't seem to be very helpful for the Puerto Rican people, especially at the time that Donald Trump was elected in his first term. And Olga ends up talking to him, and it seems like there's a connection between Reggie and Olga's mother, which Olga doesn't really know too much about. Meanwhile, after hearing that Jan had killed himself because he was worried about HIV, we find out that Prieto had a bit of an affair with Jan and is worried about HIV himself, which we later find out he's positive with, that he has the disease, and that's something that he has to sort of struggle with, and how to tell his constituents. Also, Olga gets involved with the Russian mob in order to make a couple bucks here and there. That's a sort of struggle that she's dealing with, although she's not unwilling to be a part of it. There's also a wedding for her cousin Mabel, which she brings some fancy items that she stole from her rich clientele, although Mabel calls her out on this by saying, this is all about you, but they don't even know that you provided it, so they just think that I'm a good wedding person or something like that. And it's there that she establishes a further relationship with Mateo, which is pretty significant, although she's still sort of involved with Dick, although she realizes that he's an asshole who doesn't care much for her. He doesn't care much for her family either. And then a bunch of hurricanes hit Puerto Rico, which is something that actually happened at the time in 2017. And Olga has a bit of a sort of corner show on Good Morning Later, which is like Good Morning America. And during that time, she speaks out about how the rich people have ignored Puerto Rico and how it's been oppressed for so many years and colonialism, and it ends up like being shot, and it draws the ire of the president, and it also like gets her a bit of notoriety, and her clients don't really like it because they feel betrayed. And then we also see Prieto going down to Puerto Rico and getting involved in some shenanigans there, and from there the rest of the story takes place, and I'll let you go find that out on your own, but again, I will be talking about that in the analysis section. In terms of analysis, there is quite a bit worth talking about with Olga Dies Dreaming. I'm not really sure what the title means, because Olga doesn't die, so what exactly, maybe like she's dreaming about a better world and that changes Olga, and the Olga we know is dead, but I'm not really sure what that means. If you have any suggestions, let me know in the comments below. But one of the main things that Xochitl Gonzalez is talking about here is that of selling out, as opposed to duty to the cause, duty to your people. Olga's mom says that Olga and Prieto are losing their way. Essentially, like, she's worried that being in America and not being there to guide them, which is her fault mostly, is causing them to lose their perspective and lose their understanding of what they owe to Puerto Rico, to their people. We see that with the mom says that Olga is the wealthy people's maid by being a wedding planner, and Prieto isn't doing actual justice for Puerto Rico in the bills that he's passing. Like she says, there's a duty to help Puerto Rico achieve autonomy, to push it towards independence and self-rule, not just being a state, which would just create its own problems, but allowing it to be a place where where Puerto Ricans can sort of choose their own future. And a lot of that is being done through the Young Lords, which was an old organization, kind of like the Black Panthers, but mostly focused on Puerto Rican independence, which later they kind of broke up. But the mom was committed to the cause and eventually left the family in order to make happen. Like, even though the mom says that they're not doing what they must, they're helping how they can. Like, Olga is donating money where she can and supporting her own Puerto Rican family members, the extended family, in the ways that she can, which is very good, which is more than the mother is doing. Again, she abandoned the family, left her husband, who was dealing with addiction, and things were not that great. So, like, Olga and Prieto are doing more. Like, Prieto's trying his best to help Puerto Rico in his legislation and helping his home community. And it's also important to note that because the mom left, Olga and Prieto didn't have a strong connection to Puerto Rico. They consider themselves Americans, Brooklynites, more so than anything else. They think it's important to make money to try to survive in America because there's not that connection to Puerto Rico, even if they do love and understand that it is their homeland. Like, even though there's a desire to chase the American dream, as so many people have been told, like, the mother, Olga's mother, is like, no, the American dream is a lie. The American dream was something you were sold, but it's never going to be obtainable by you specifically, because the people in power don't want people of color to have the American dream. They want to restrict it so that only their people can really have it. And she does have a good point there. Allow me to read you an interesting quote from this. Olga, don't delude yourself. This means none of these things. Yes, you are bright, but you are also pretty and fair-skinned and speak in a way that doesn't rub white skin the wrong way. Your admittance to this place is nothing more than a minuscule gesture to reaffirm the myth of an American meritocracy, one that makes the school feel benevolent, without damaging their elitist system, a system in which the only thing you're certain to lose is your sense of self. And that's a very interesting kind of passage from this story, where the mother is writing to Olga, saying, you know, like, they're only letting you in because you don't look like the traditional Puerto Rican woman. Like, the system wants to make it look benevolent, but it's really just reaffirming what already exists. And if you go and chase after that money, which she writes later in the letter, like, you're only reaffirming this unjust system, and you're never really going to obtain the American dream that you thought you might obtain. And that's a really interesting message, especially when she says the American meritocracy doesn't exist, because it is not. And you know that because all the people in power, at least in this day and age, are dumb. And they mostly, the people in power have always been dumb and ineffective and hurting others. They've only ever been out for their self-interest. So in many ways, the mother is right. And you see this sort of dichotomy between the mother being right and, Olga and Prieto also kind of being right. Because yes, there is an unjust system that you have to fight against, and you do have a duty to your people, to your cause, to make sure that you lift them up, especially if you have the power and the means, and not falling for this propaganda that that the capitalist society is the only one that's right, and not falling for the propaganda that you lift yourself up by the bootstraps, because that only allows it to further be, sent out, further shared, and more people are going to believe that, which is, it's not the actual case for how this world is. But on the other side of things, Olga and Prieto are not wrong. There is no money to be made in being a martyr for the cause. Like, you can fight and fight and fight for the cause, but unless you're like the mother and you abandon all responsibilities to go to Mexico and Puerto Rico and raise money for the cause and become a criminal in the system by fighting and launching a revolution, like, you still have to live in America. You still have to make ends meet, to pay rent, to buy food, to struggle to live. And so if you have a good job that allows you to give back in some way, or in Prieto's case, a great job that allows you to, help benefit the people in your community who are people of color, and try your best, like, that's a great thing too. Like, why wouldn't you want to do that? And I realized that, like, giving into the American dream at all is certainly going to further this sort of propaganda, and maybe you can't fix the system by being within the system itself. But again, there's no money in being a martyr. You can fight and fight and fight, but at the end of the day, Olga and Prieto need to live. Olga and Prieto need to be in the United States, because that is where they are from. A very interesting sort of dynamic that Gonzalez explores, creating a real struggle. Never really saying that it's okay to sell out, merely saying that you live in the United States, you have to sort of exist in this system until someone tears it down, until people like you tear it down. Gonzalez is also writing about family in this story. Olga and Prieto have a pretty difficult relationship with their parents. Their father was an addict who was ruined by the Vietnam War, ruined by unhelpful policies, ruined by his wife just leaving him, and telling him in a letter that he brought her down by convincing her that a family was worth it, which is a pretty awful thing to say to your husband, and for an awful thing for your kids to read years later. And of course, like, the mother was more concerned with revolution, with raising up the Puerto Rican people, than she was with raising this family that she started. Olga and Prieto try to understand their mom, but she feels so slippery. And even when Prieto meets the mother later, like, he goes to Puerto Rico and he's taken to the site of the stronghold, the rebel stronghold, like, he still doesn't completely understand his mother. She's like, you sold out, like, you hurt us, you should never come back to Puerto Rico, you are a problem. And he's just like, I wanted a sort of resolution with my mother, and I never got that. And he realizes he's never going to get that because she's so focused on other things, and she feels like having kids was a problem. He's never really going to get what he wants, but she's going to try to be a factor in his life and demand things of him. Like, when he votes the wrong way, like, she sends him worms. There's a lot of emotional manipulation in the letters that the mom is sending her children, like, guilting Olga into not marrying a man that she loves, and for, like, even saying, like, trying to recruit her for the cause so that she'll get money from Eichenborn, because the mom finds out about that, she's like, oh, you gotta keep sleeping with him so that he'll give us supplies for the revolution, which ends up backfiring. And when that happens, the mother just cuts off contact with her, like it wasn't anything. But it's like, why would you use your daughter in that way? She's your daughter. Like, the purpose of motherhood and family is that you support one another. But as has been made clear, there's a lot of abandonment in this story, which is unfortunate. Just very clear that the mother, isn't there for family, even though family is very important, because family outside mother are father, Prieto and Olga support one another. They look out for one another. Grandmother was a very big factor because she was the one who raised them. And then, like, the other family members, aunts and uncles, like, there's a very strong support system, which is very important culturally speaking. But it's very clear that, like, abandoning your family is the wrong move to make. That family has to be there to support each other, especially in this very hostile and cruel world. Allow me to read you a good quote from this. It was a brutal exercise wrestling with objective reality, to see how their mother had manipulated their lives and their feelings, to see how she attempted to subtly poison the way they saw their aunts and uncles, their cousins, their father, and even in some instances their grandmother, all the people who had loved them in her absence. Which I think is a very fascinating quote from this, just because the mother, like, even though family is important and the mother is like, we gotta support our people, she's more than willing to sell out individuals and more than willing to just abandon certain people. And, like, maybe you could argue that, like, the cause is greater than the family. Like, you have to support the many over the few, but that's a really cruel and awful way to view the people who are close to you, to view them as sort of betrayers or something like that if they don't do exactly what you want, which is in fact what the mother says to Prieto, like, you betrayed the cause. We're done with you. Don't even come back. That's not something you want to hear from family. Gonzalez is also writing about class here. Gentrification is a big element in this story. You see, like, people trying to move into Brooklyn and gentrifying it, especially the wealthy sort of business leaders who are blackmailing Prieto. It just shows, like, the people who live in Brooklyn, like, who originally lived there, like, Brooklyn is no longer for the Brooklynites. It's for the wealthy people who want to come in and take all the resources that they possibly can. And that extends to Puerto Rico as well. Like, it was happening before the story. Wealthy companies moved in, and when they could no longer make money, they left. They took all the resources they can, and then after the hurricanes, wealthy people moved back in an effort to sort of establish a libertarian utopia, which is not good. Libertarianism is wrong and stupid, and it's a political sort of ideology that doesn't make any sense at all, and I can go on and on about it, but essentially you see a lot of gentrification, a lot of class exploitation happening in these two areas. You also see that with Olga, like, she's a wedding planner, come from a poor background, but she has, like, wealthy friends because of this as a wedding planner, people who seem to trust her and she trusts them. But she's not deluding herself, because she knows that she can kind of take as much money as she can from the wealthy people, and sometimes they won't even notice because it's just sort of expected. And then like, her mother's criticism comes into play in this story, where she calls Olga a maid for the rich people. And that's kind of true with what a wedding planner is, but also it's not really true at all. The criticism is a bit unfair, because Olga's just, again, trying to make ends meet. She's trying to move up in the world, but all her mother sees is somebody who's a slave, not a slave, but just a servant to the upper class, which, again, not necessarily true, but there are many points, especially when after Olga goes on TV and criticizes the government, especially the wealthy people, for exploiting Puerto Rico. Her wealthy clientele consider that a betrayal of everything that they've done for her. Like, we helped you, you owe us your loyalty. You owe us a recognition that us wealthy people have never done anything wrong. And it's interesting, because she's not really calling any of those wealthy people out, but they feel that her saying very liberal things, socialist things, even anarchist things, even, like, is a violation of their trust. That that she would never call them out on their bullshit, essentially. That it's she owes them. Again, complete and utter loyalty, accepting everything they do as good and positive, even though it is definitely not. The wealthy think they're righteous, essentially. They think that their shit doesn't stink, and that they could never be the ones. Like, oh, I love the gay people and whatnot. You hear that constantly. Like, I support the Puerto Rico statehood or whatnot. And when people call them out for the many ways that they're engaging in colonialism and other bad behavior, they're taken aback, because they don't want to be called out like that. Like, even liberals, like, who engage in this type of behavior, they're like, oh, I support the cause, but they do things that don't necessarily support that cause. So you see a lot of class here, and Gonzalez noting how in many cases, like, wealthy white people will feel like they might feel that there's an obligation to support them, that they can't do anything wrong, even though they are doing many things wrong, and they might hold that over people of color as saying, like, I'm supporting your cause, I'm doing more than most people, even though, again, they're not. Gonzalez is talking about other amazing things that I've touched upon already. Some of it's like colonialism and revolution, the process and the struggle that it takes. The beautiful romance between Mateo and Olga in the story, and the work that it takes is well written. Very descriptive, very complex, in-depth writing at times that really gives you, like, an insight into the characters, what they're feeling, and their backgrounds especially. I think that's pretty interesting. I also think the end of the story is pretty fascinating, because at the end, in the epilogue, there's someone assassinates the governor of Puerto Rico, and Olga believes it's her mother. And she has this moment where she's like, maybe I should call the FBI agent that I know and, just tell them the information about my mother, get her sent to jail so she can't hurt people. And then she's like, but if I do that, she'll be a martyr for the cause. She's never going to go quietly. She's going to fight, and then people will see her as a revolutionary figure. And I'll have to see her face for the rest of my life. So very interesting that the reason that she chooses not to tell her, not to narc on her mother, is because of the troubled relationship between the two. Imagine if your mother was, the reason Puerto Rico was fighting for its independence. Imagine, having that duty to your country, but also the person who's kind of leading it forward is a person who neglected and abandoned you. And I know you might argue that there's the cause is greater than the feelings that you feel towards one individual person, but when that person is your mother, when they're treating you terribly and sort of manipulating your life, it's hard to get around that, I would say. Very interesting sort of feelings there, and a very sort of powerful ending, which, does feel kind of fantasy at times, because Puerto Rico is still under the thumb of oppressive rulers, of the oppressive American regime, and very colonialist, and the native Puerto Ricans are not being given a fair chance at rising above all of that. But still a really good ending, and overall a lot of great work on Gonzalez's part. Anyway, those are my thoughts on Olga Dies Dreaming. Very good book, one of the best that I've read this year. The year-end list is becoming crowded as I continue on through the year, and this one is definitely a must-read. Go seek it out at your local library. Perhaps you can buy it. Xochitl Gonzalez is definitely an author that's going to be important to look at going forward. If you have any thoughts on this book, or you simply want to comment on my review here, let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you and have a discussion, potentially. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that other people can find out about this book or this author if they don't already know. And join the Discord if you want to have further conversations about this sort of thing. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and Puerto Rican revolutionary travels. Farewell.